think you know the person you've built a life with, until one day he looks at you with eyes you no longer recognize and rips that life apart like it was nothing. Yesterday, after 15 years of marriage, my husband Stephen dropped divorce papers on our coffee table and told me, almost casually, that I was a useless wife. His words weren't shouted, they weren't angry. They were delivered with the calm, smug finality of a man who had already replaced me. He didn't even flinch when I asked why. "Melissa takes care of herself," he said, smirking. "She has ambition." Melissa, his mistress, his shiny new obsession. A fitness influencer with bleached hair, airbrushed abs, and 50,000 strangers cheering her on through filtered posts. I sat there in silence, because what could I say that would cut deeper than the betrayal already carved into my chest? I should have seen it coming. The puzzle pieces had been scattered in front of me for months, but denial is a powerful drug. 8 months ago, Stephen became obsessed with fitness. Up before dawn, pounding out F45 classes, checking his Apple Watch like it was a second heartbeat. He filled his closet with Lululemon, his shelves with supplements, his phone with new notifications he always seemed to hide when I walked by. At first, I was proud of him, even encouraged him. We aren't getting younger, and health matters. He even bought me a Peloton for Christmas, though he made sure to remind me weekly how expensive it was and how little I used it. Then came the cologne. A free sample from Sephora, he claimed. The late nights at work. The sharp little comments slipped into conversation. "Maybe you should try Botox, everyone's doing it." "Have you seen those viral skincare products? They'd help you keep up." I take care of myself just fine. I just never wanted to waste hundreds of dollars on whatever cream Instagram was selling that week. But in his eyes, my refusal to play dress-up for strangers had become a flaw. The final crack appeared yesterday when I found a Tiffany receipt in his pocket while folding laundry. We shop at Target. We drive a 2018 Honda. Tiffany is another planet. My pulse spiked as I opened our joint account. Multiple unexplained transfers, our savings draining drip by drip over 6 months. He had been bleeding us dry in secret. When he walked in, I held the receipt out like a weapon. He didn't bother to deny it. He laughed, actually laughed, like betrayal was a joke only he understood. Then he disappeared into his office, returned with a thick envelope, and tossed it on the table. "Since you're snooping, you might as well know. My lawyer says this is generous. You've contributed basically nothing to this marriage." His voice was steady, triumphant, like a man presenting a victory speech. I stared at the divorce papers while he boasted about Melissa, about her ambition, about how she was going places. Places, apparently, that required rings from Tiffany's, paid for with money I helped save while putting my own ambitions on hold so his career could flourish. The most chilling part wasn't his cruelty. It was his certainty. He was so sure I would collapse without him. "Let's be realistic," he said, zipping his suitcase with an infuriating calm. "You can barely work the Netflix app without me. Within a week, you'll be begging me to take you back. I'm doing you a favor, teaching you to finally grow up." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, watching the man I once trusted strip our home of everything he valued, his gaming console, his iPad, his expensive suits, even the good coffee machine. He left me the cheap one, as if to remind me of my new station in life. Then he walked out the door without looking back. The silence that followed was louder than any fight we'd ever had. I opened my laptop, hands trembling, and began combing through our accounts. Transfers to names I didn't recognize, credit card charges for restaurants I'd never been to, hotels I'd never stayed in, Venmo payments that told their own sickening story. With every discovery, the reality sharpened like glass under my skin. This wasn't impulsive. Stephen had been planning my replacement for months, carefully, methodically. And now he was gone, convinced I'd crumble in his absence. He couldn't be more wrong. The night Stephen walked out, I called my sister Stephanie. She arrived within the hour, no questions asked, arms full of snacks and eyes burning with the kind of protective fury only a sister can summon. We stayed up until dawn, knee-deep in receipts, bank statements, and scraps of paper he thought I'd never bother to check. By sunrise, my dining table looked like a crime scene, and, in a way, it was. The evidence of a betrayal meticulously planned. That morning, I called in sick, dialed the number of a divorce attorney I'd found online, and froze every joint card we had. A trick I'd learned from a random TikTok of all things. Funny how strangers can save you from the ruins your husband leaves behind. Within hours, Stephen's perfect plan began to unravel. By nightfall, my phone showed 23 missed calls. His first voicemail was sharp, venomous. "Don't you dare touch our accounts." The second came like a hammer. "You'll regret this." By the 10th, his tone had shifted, cracking around the edges. "We can still fix this. Just talk to me." The audacity almost made me laugh. I've been at Stephanie's ever since, camped on her couch while her son's toys occupy the guest room. I don't mind. The warmth of her house, even with scattered Legos stabbing my bare feet at midnight, feels safer than the cold silence of mine. Still, reality hit me hard when I tried to order a $30 Amazon item and my card declined. That's when the full picture emerged. Stephen had been siphoning money for months, not in large amounts that would raise alarms, but slow, steady withdrawals. 200 here, 300 there, always labelled with words designed to disarm me. Car maintenance, home repairs, insurance. Things I wouldn't question. Looking at them now, they're almost insulting in their laziness. For years I trusted him with the joint account, pouring my paychecks into what he called our future. He built a future, all right, just not one that included me. The transactions painted their own story. Dinners at the new fusion restaurant downtown, where appetizers cost more than what I'd budget for dinner for two. Movie tickets, coffee shops near her apartment. Meanwhile, he'd lecture me for spending $50 at Target on cleaning supplies and groceries. "Do you really need that?" he'd ask. Apparently he did. He just meant it for someone else. Stephanie, who works at a bank, skimmed through the records like a detective flipping through case files. Her mouth tightened. "This is financial abuse," she muttered. The words felt too heavy, too dramatic. I wanted to argue, to brush it off, but the truth stuck to my skin. Abuse doesn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it drains your savings while you sleep beside the man doing it. Yesterday, at Walmart, I bumped into his cousin George. I braced for pity, but instead he helped me choose a printer to scan legal documents. Then, as if handing over a casual warning, he admitted Stephen had pulled the same tricks on his high school girlfriend. Lying, manipulating, siphoning money. 15 years of my life, and no one thought I deserved that truth sooner. The calls keep coming. Less frequent now. 5, maybe 6 a day, but his tone has shifted again. "Just worried about you handling the bills," he texted, as though I hadn't been running a household for over a decade. Melissa even reached out on Facebook. "We should talk sometime." Talk? About what? How she knowingly shared a bed with another woman's husband? I left her on red. She doesn't deserve my words. Yesterday, I finally sat across from a divorce attorney. Nothing glossy, just a woman I found through a support group online. She listened, took notes, frowned at the financials. When I handed her the folder Stephanie and I compiled, she shook her head. "We'll need to move quickly. He's already trying to hide assets." I thought I had reached the peak of betrayal. I was wrong. Because when I dug into our old shared email account, I found confirmation emails for a credit card I didn't know existed. Not a glamorous card, not a gold-plated status symbol, just a basic Capital One account with a modest $3,000 limit. But the charges? They were enough to make my stomach twist. And that was only the beginning. The hidden card was the final insult. He'd been using it for months, mostly on dinners and gas stations near her apartment. I had to laugh when I saw the Planet Fitness charges. Stephen, who bragged endlessly about his high-end F45 classes, was sneaking in cheap workouts to impress his fitness influencer girlfriend. So much for the glamorous lifestyle he flaunted. Melissa clearly wasn't funding the fairy tale as much as he pretended. That same day, I walked into Chase and opened my own account, a small checking account in my name only. The woman at the desk explained the app, how to transfer money, how to set alerts. None of it was difficult. Not the rocket science Stephen always insisted it was. For years, he convinced me I couldn't manage finances, couldn't handle technology, couldn't function without him. But there I was, navigating a banking app in 5 minutes flat. And Netflix. The mystery of why he always insisted on managing it? Solved. I found an extra profile he'd created, one he shared with her. Our account, our home, and yet he'd carved out a corner of it to live his double life. Real classy, Stephen. I've taken precautions. Cards frozen, screenshots saved in neat folders on my phone. Every message, every transaction documented. My lawyer told me not to engage with either of them. So Melissa's Facebook message, "We should talk sometime," remains unanswered. Some of you would demand confrontation, exposure, drama. Not me. I don't need to sink into the mud with them. My dignity is the only thing I plan to walk out with intact. And then karma stepped in. This week, I started a new job. Nothing glamorous, basic customer service, $16 an hour. But the office happens to be in the same building as one of Stephen's prized clients, the ones he was always desperate to impress. I didn't plan it. I just saw the posting on Indeed and applied. On my very first day, guess who I stepped into the elevator with? Stephen, in his overpriced Nordstrom suit, Melissa trailing behind him like a pet on a leash. The look on his face when he saw me in work clothes, laptop bag on my shoulder, eyes steady, priceless. Melissa stared, wide-eyed, probably realizing her successful boyfriend was rattled by a woman he claimed couldn't survive without him. But karma wasn't done. At work, my manager noticed how detail-oriented I am and asked me to organize spreadsheets. While learning Excel through YouTube tutorials, I realized those same skills could bring order to Stephen's chaos. I built folders, neatly categorized bank statements, credit card bills, Venmo histories, receipts, screenshots. Every betrayal, every lie, mapped out in columns and color-coded tabs. When I handed the bundle to my lawyer, she smiled for the first time. This is perfect. We won't even need a forensic accountant. Stephen discovered this at mediation. He walked in brimming with confidence, probably imagining I'd show up disheveled, desperate, emotional. Instead, he sat across from me while the mediator sifted through binders of his shady transactions. Hotel stays near Melissa's apartment. Dinners disguised as business meetings. Gasoline charges far from home. His jaw tightened with every page. The man who thought I couldn't balance a budget now had to watch as I dismantled his life one receipt at a time. And then came the Peloton. The Christmas gift he lorded over me, reminding me how much it cost, how little I used it. Last week, I finally logged into the account. Buried in the workout history was the truth. Stephen and Melissa had been using it together, in our house, on weekends when I was visiting my sister. I printed the activity log, slid it across the table during mediation, and watched him stutter, scrambling for excuses that sounded as pathetic as they were. But the sweetest strike of all? Melissa herself. She finally learned Stephen wasn't the wealthy provider he pretended to be. The Tiffany promise ring he'd boasted about wasn't even real, just a knockoff from a discount website. I had the receipts, and then, in an unexpected twist, she reached out again. Not with a plea, not with arrogance, but with ammunition. Screenshots, dozens of them. Melissa's screenshots were a gift I didn't expect. Promises scrawled in text bubbles, Stephen vowing to buy her a car. With what money, exactly? Planning a move into a luxury apartment he couldn't dream of affording. And, of course, the venom. The things he wrote about me, his wife of 15 years, were vicious enough to sting. But in the end, they were just more evidence. Melissa's message was short. I thought you should see who he really is. I'm done being part of his lies. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded everything to my attorney. Professional revenge tastes cleaner than public drama. Then came the cherry on top. Stephen's mother called. Her voice trembled as she apologized, not just for his recent cruelty, but for years of quietly excusing his behavior. Then she dropped the news. Stephen had been fired. Not because of me, not because of Melissa, but because he'd been padding his expense reports. Every business dinner with Melissa, every hotel stay, every extravagant bill, charged to his company card. For one wild second, I wanted to post it all. Screenshots, receipts, his smug little texts calling me useless. Blast it across Facebook, let him choke on the humiliation. But I didn't have to. Stephen was already dismantling his own reputation, brick by brick. Instead, I poured my energy into my new studio apartment, bought a few plants from Home Depot, still alive, surprisingly, figured out how to mount a TV with nothing but a YouTube tutorial, even started cooking real meals, discovering I wasn't nearly as hopeless in the kitchen as Stephen loved to sneer. So when he inevitably crawled back under a fresh Instagram alias to message me, I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't even reply. I marked it as spam and returned to chopping onions, letting the sizzle of garlic in olive oil drown him out. But karma wasn't finished. Last Tuesday, coffee in hand at Starbucks, I overheard two men at the next table whispering about a colleague caught charging personal expenses to company accounts. I ignored it until I heard his name. Stephen. Turns out the fraud went back further than anyone guessed. He'd been pulling the same scheme at his last 3 jobs. And how did that little secret come to light? Melissa. When the promises dried up, no more cheesecake factory dinners, no more shopping trips, no more weekend getaways. She didn't just walk away, she detonated the bomb. Apparently, Stephen had loved showing off his clever tricks with expense reports, bragging about how he gamed the system. Melissa had kept everything, screenshots, photos, receipts, tucked away in her Google Photos like a scrapbook of fraud. Last week, she made a TikTok. Nothing too dramatic, just a story time about dating a man who turned out to be a fraud. No names, but plenty of glimpses of those receipts. It didn't take long for his former colleagues to recognize the format. The video spread through our small town like wildfire. Meanwhile, I enjoyed a small victory of my own. Remember that joint Amazon account Stephen was desperate to reclaim? Turns out he'd been using it to buy Melissa gifts while we were still married. So, I did something petty, but exquisitely satisfying. I returned everything still within the window. The refunds went back to my card, since technically I was the original purchaser. By the time Stephen realized, Amazon had already shipped his shiny tokens of love back to their warehouses, and Melissa was left empty-handed. But fate wasn't done twisting the knife. Yesterday, while wandering the aisles of Target for storage bins to organize my new space, I ran into his sister Rebecca. When I ran into Stephen's sister Rebecca at Target, I expected awkward small talk. Instead, she hugged me tight and spilled the kind of family secrets usually buried deep. Stephen, it turns out, had been borrowing money from their parents for investment opportunities. In reality, he was funneling their retirement savings into his fantasy life with Melissa. Dinners, clothes, weekend getaways, all while pretending he was some self-made success. His parents found out in the most cinematic way possible, during a family dinner at Olive Garden. Melissa's TikTok had reached his mother's Facebook feed, and by dessert, the quiet meal erupted into a scene worthy of reality TV. Stephen's father, red-faced with fury, snatched back the spare house key in front of the entire family. That was the moment their golden boy was officially cut off. Stephen's response? Total meltdown. He flooded everyone with frantic messages, spinning half-baked excuses. He made new Instagram accounts to harass Melissa. He called his old job, begging for another chance. He even showed up at his parents' house at midnight, pounding on the door like a man locked out of his own kingdom. They didn't let him in, but karma still had more in store. Remember how he always claimed I was too disorganized to manage our shared cloud storage? I finally logged into it last week to download some old photos. What I found instead was a neatly hidden folder, screenshots of his conversations with Melissa from the early days of their affair. Plans, fantasies, even timelines about how he'd leave me and what their new life would look like. I didn't need to confront him. I just forwarded them to my attorney. She actually laughed, shaking her head. "You're making my job very easy." And then Melissa dropped another bomb. She posted a follow-up TikTok, this time flaunting the infamous Tiffany ring, complete with proof that it came from a knockoff website. The video hit 50,000 views within hours. His shiny illusion shattered under the glare of the internet. Desperate, Stephen showed up at my workplace, demanding to talk, begging me to help him fix his reputation. Security didn't even let him pass the lobby. His little tantrum is now immortalized on our office security cameras, a highlight reel of his downfall. I'll admit, I indulged in some pettiness too. Yesterday, I changed the passwords on all our old streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, even his precious ESPN+. Then, I sat back and watched as his Ring camera notifications lit up, one after another, as he tried and failed to log in. By the third attempt, I was laughing out loud. The universe served me one last treat this morning. His Tesla Model 3, the car he leased far beyond our budget to impress Melissa, was repossessed in broad daylight. And where did it happen? The parking lot of the Motel 6 he's been living in since Melissa threw him out. I watched it all from the Dunkin' drive-thru across the street, coffee in hand. I hadn't planned it. Sometimes fate just arranges these little moments for you. 6 months have passed since the day he called me useless and shoved divorce papers into my hands. The divorce is now official. No explosive courtroom drama, just signatures, lawyers, and stale office air. Stephen sat across from me in the same Nordstrom shirt he once bragged about, only now it was wrinkled and pulling tight around his stomach. The glow of his fitness influencer life had long since burned out. His company never pressed charges over the expense reports. No courtroom spectacle, no police knocking at his door, just quiet corporate efficiency. They withheld his last paycheck, stripped his bonuses, blacklisted him from future opportunities, and moved on. Stephen, once so desperate for admiration, vanished into professional obscurity without so much as a headline. Melissa left him too. No viral post, no dramatic breakup. She simply packed her things and moved back to her parents' house in the suburbs. Turns out, life with Stephen wasn't so glamorous once the free dinners stopped. She even tried to message me, spinning her side of the story, but I let it sit unread. Some things don't need closure. Now Stephen is renting a single room in a shared house across town. His Tesla is gone, replaced by a beat-up Honda, the same kind of car he once mocked me for wanting to buy. Poetic, really. And me? I'm not the useless wife he tried to reduce me to. I'm rebuilding piece by piece, stronger, sharper, and finally free. Life isn't glamorous, but it's mine now. I'm still at my customer service job, nothing flashy, but I recently got a $5 a raise. Not life-changing, but enough to feel like progress. I even figured out my own taxes through TurboTax. Turns out it's not some labyrinthine mystery, just another thing Stephen exaggerated to make me feel small. Last week, I ran into his mother at Target. We stood in the storage bin aisle, and instead of ducking away, we actually talked. She admitted Stephen had tried to borrow money from them again. They refused. He needs to grow up, she said, and then helped me pick out a couple of inexpensive but surprisingly stylish throw pillows for my little studio. Funny how simple kindness can feel revolutionary. The apartment finally feels like home. A few plants from Home Depot, 2 still thriving, 1 stubbornly refusing. I've learned to cook simple meals with HelloFresh, and on weekends, I drag myself to Planet Fitness. Nothing intense, just enough to remind myself I'm still moving forward. Stephen hasn't disappeared. He still tries to claw his way back into my life through fake Instagram accounts, usually late at night, drunk. His messages are predictable. You'll regret this. You can't make it without me. Block, delete, repeat. The cycle almost makes me laugh now, especially since I found his old password list buried in our shared Google Drive. The man who mocked me for being disorganized kept every login in a file literally labeled passwords. I didn't use them. I just forwarded the list to his sister Rebecca with a note. Tell him to change these. Meanwhile, my life has become beautifully ordinary. Bills paid on time, minor house repairs tackled with YouTube tutorials, budget balanced without a meltdown. All the things Stephen swore I was incapable of doing, I now do without thinking. There's even a man named Jacob at work. We eat lunch together in the break room sometimes. Nothing serious. He's divorced too, and he understands why I'm not ready for anything more. For now, it's enough to share a sandwich and laugh about the absurdities of office life. Stephen, on the other hand, is unravelling. I overheard some men from his old office while getting coffee at Dunkin' last week. Apparently, he's been calling, emailing, even showing up in their lobby, begging for his job back. They didn't even bother calling security, just let him stand there until he gave up and slunk away. No luxury gym membership now. He's at the same Planet Fitness as me. We crossed paths in the parking lot once. Neither of us spoke. His eyes slid away first. Melissa's back on dating apps. His so-called important contacts don't answer his calls. The empire he thought he had was nothing but scaffolding, and now it's collapsed. I've been doing some cleaning lately, both literal and metaphorical. Last weekend, I stumbled across our old wedding photos. That girl in the white dress, smiling too hard, desperate to fit into the mould he carved for her. I hardly recognise her. She's gone. What remains is someone different, stronger, steadier, finally, truly herself. And the most satisfying moment of all, it wasn't the mediation, or the repossession, or even the TikToks that dragged his name through the mud. It was yesterday, at the bank. I walked up to the counter to deposit my paycheck. Yes, I still like doing it in person, and saw the same teller who helped me open my first solo account 6 months ago, when my hands were trembling and my stomach was a knot of fear. She looked at me, really looked, and smiled. "You look happier," she said, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't hesitate. "I am,"